Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast. I'm the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, special guest, longtime friend, covers the Pittsburgh Steelers for Steelers on SI. Noah Strackbein is here to preview the game. 2 8-6 squads, both really needing this contest for their playoff hopes. And it's really interesting where these two teams find themselves. So, Noah, how are things going in Steelers land coming off of a victory? I know the mood's a little bit lighter than it is here in Detroit.
Yeah, it's definitely come a long way since 3 weeks ago when the Fire Tomlin chants took over the stadium and everything was burning around us. It was chaos. We've come a long way in 2 weeks. Steelers land has, and it's very calm. It's kind of exciting right now. If you are a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, starting to kind of gain some belief in this team, I'll tell you from inside the franchise, things are cool, calm, and collected. But I think the Lions will change everything, good or bad, one way or the other.
Yeah, what I like about this contest is the Lions had a chance to go out west to play the Rams, and they got bullied, unfortunately. They faced off against one of the NFC powerhouses, a Super Bowl contender. They know what it's like. And coming back home, they see another team that has 13 personnel. That is, we're looking at a film. Darnell Washington is a monster. And we're seeing, opportunities that the Steelers have to move the football with Metcalf and Aaron Rodgers storyline. So there's a lot to get to. But let's just back up. The offseason featured some additions, and obviously, most notably, Aaron Rodgers. What's it been like with him under center? I think it provided a little bit of stability and a little bit of excitement for the Steelers getting a quarterback that I think could stabilize an organization. I know it comes with a little bit of noise and expectations and things like that, the circus that is the media circus around Aaron Rodgers, but he's been somebody that another year removed from his injury, seems like he's playing pretty well for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and the media circus is so true. I could still remember the first day that he showed up because it was a 3-month chase, and he shows up during minicamp. And I have never once in my entire life seen so many people show up at UPMC Rooney Sports Complex to watch this guy. It was balcony, field. There were dozens of people here just to see this man throw a football for the first time in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. It was crazy. But I'll tell you what, Aaron Rodgers is a guy that's come in here and given the Steelers exactly what they're looking for. He's not a superstar quarterback, although at times there are flashes of vintage Rodgers, which is cool. But overall, he's been a just above average QB, makes the throws, is reliable most of the time, and keeps everything cool, calm, and collected, which I think is important for the Steelers, who are still trying to find themselves and what their identity is and mesh as a group. They haven't had that in years. So that's, as big as it gets at the quarterback position, to have somebody who can go in there and play quarterback, operate your team as a quarterback. I think that's the side of football that people overlook at that position, is that, keeping the team together is so important. And he does that. Everything flows very well. So for the Steelers, it's been all positive. Even with the media chaos that definitely follows Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, no, it's been interesting because, from the outside looking in, there's been some concerns with the Steelers offense. Well, here in Detroit, there's concerns about the Lions defense, giving up an average of 30 points a game the last month of the season. Tell me a little bit of staples of the Art Smith offense, and how has Aaron Rodgers been handling it? How has the offense been looking over the course of the last quarter of the season?
It's crazy because you asked that question and it's still evolving. We're still trying to figure this out. At times, it was, heavy tight end. We live and die off of Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington. Then it evolved more towards they live and die off of the run game. And now it's kind of coming into its own where we live and die off of Aaron Rodgers. And I think that's where they wanted to end up, is to have a receiving core that can lead them to, points and big plays and that kind of stuff. And then have a ground game that's super reliable, which they have in Kenneth Gainwell and Jaylen Warren. And then it's just about, where is and what is Aaron Rodgers doing and how good does he look? The staples right now, because again, it's changed so much, have gone from the tight ends to DK Metcalf has become the ultimate weapon, he had a down year, but anybody who sits around saying DK Metcalf isn't a good wide receiver anymore, maybe he's dropped a couple passes. He's still a good wide receiver. And that's become where the big plays are is Aaron to DK, and then it's just meticulously moving the ball, running a lot of jumbo sets, leaning on your running backs to provide third and short situations, and then go from there. It hasn't been perfect, to be really honest. Arthur Smith has had a very rocky season, but right now the Steelers are definitely coming into their own. And you've seen the last 2 games.
Yeah, that's what it's what I think makes Mike Tomlin a great coach is whatever goes on, all the noise, all the speculation. There's even whispers every couple moments about him in college, other teams. Where's he going to end up after this year? I mean, my goodness, he's such a staple, and he's close again to having another winning season. And that's just really what Dan Campbell reflected today was the respect that he has for Mike Tomlin, just one of those guys that does the job and always ends up with a winning record. But yeah, I do think that the Steelers are now similarly like the Lions fans. It's just, okay, yeah, you can get to the playoffs. We've been there, done that, but we still yearn and thirst again for some championship type hope. So that's why this game, I think, has a chance to be really good. Maybe not as good as the Steelers, the Seahawks and the Rams, but I think it has a chance to be a competitive contest. 2 teams going back and forth, 2 teams that want to run the football, and 2 teams that have explosive potential, but not being able at times to utilize it. But here in Detroit, it starts with Jahmyr Gibbs. What's it like now on the Steelers side defensively? We know about Jalen Ramsey and what he can do, but we see that he's playing a little bit more safety this year. How is the Steelers defense potentially, from your mind, going to stop one of the most explosive offenses in terms of having a lot of weapons and the potential with a deep threat in Jamison Williams? But here in Detroit, it starts with Jahmyr Gibbs, who also has a chance to be very explosive. He's somebody that has become a focal point, has almost made the backup David Montgomery irrelevant in regards to his carries are down, snap counts are down. So the Lions definitely value Jahmyr Gibbs, and I do think the Steelers defense is going to get a heavy dose of Jahmyr Gibbs, the former first-round pick.
Yeah, let me start by saying this, that shout out to Jahmyr Gibbs, because I drafted him when he came out as a rookie, and I've never been so excited to make a fantasy pick in my life. And then David Montgomery became the ultimate vulture that season. And, this year I decided, later in the draft, we're going David Montgomery. That was another mistake. Long story short, don't ever listen to my fantasy football advice. It's awful. For the Steelers, it definitely, it comes down to that front 7 and how they're going to play. And truthfully, they have not been good against the run most of the season. They shut down the Miami Dolphins on Monday night. And yes, it was a strong performance against a Miami team that was very good at running the football, that were supposed to put up 150 plus yards on the ground, and they weren't able to do that. But it's also freezing cold and you were playing Miami. The week before that, they give up 95 yards to Derrick Henry, his best performance of the season, and Lamar doesn't have a bad game on top of it. It has not been a good run defense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have struggled once again. The biggest difference is that first-round pick Derek Harmon is on his way back and will play this weekend, and that's going to be significant. With Derek Harmon out there, they're a middle-of-the-pack run defense, and with Derek Harmon not out there, they're a bottom-of-the-pack run defense. And what's going to happen after missing 2 games with a knee injury, I don't know. Will he hit that rookie wall? Will he have a hard time coming back because he's missed time late in the season? We'll find all that out. But to me, it starts with the front 7 to figure out if they could stop Jahmyr Gibbs and company. And then the back half, I mean, they've played well the last couple of weeks. I was a guy that was very much so on the Joey Porter Jr. is a corner 2 type of player in this league coming into the season. And where I sit today, over the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks, Joey Porter Jr. looks crazy. Like, this guy looks like he could guard anybody in the league. And that's what the Steelers have had hopes for him to do. And he's got the talent to be able to do so. He just hasn't been able to put it on the field. The last couple of weeks, you're getting that. Asante Samuel Jr. gets an interception. Last week, it was a bad throw, but, still comes up with an interception last week. Brandon Echols is playing really well. And then you got Jalen Ramsey, who Jalen does nothing for like 3 games. And by nothing, I mean the offense doesn't even take a shot at throwing a football by him. And then all of a sudden he comes out of nowhere and makes a big play. So that one's we'll see what happens. But it starts with if Jahmyr Gibbs can run the football on the Steelers, it's going to be a long day. If he can't, I'd say it's probably a closer matchup than people realize between Joey Asante and Brandon Eccles and the Lions passing attack.
Yeah, I do kind of feel like this game could go in the neighborhood of 23-20. Kind of both teams wanting to run the
Yeah.
football, take their chances when they can, but to control the clock and to grind it out kind of thing. I do think it's going to be competitive and be a contest that I think could be a game that people are going to still want to watch late in the fourth quarter. Now, fill us in. TJ Watt, what kind of situation happens where he gets a punctured lung supposedly? And I'm hearing, I guess, from the injury reports that the likelihood is maybe Jared Goff is going to be knocking on wood that he might avoid one of the premier defensive ends in the league. What the heck happened? What's going on with TJ Watt?
TJ is not going to play against Lions, and it's been chaos for a week. So the final details are still coming out, and I think at one point we will know everything that's happening. I've dug into this as much as I possibly can, but I know everybody else has too, and there's no information being leaked anywhere. Mike Tomlin's being very tight knit. Sources inside the building are being very tight knit. Like it's a let's figure this out before we release it to the public type of situation, which brings up so many questions. This is what we know. Okay. TJ was in the facility getting dry needle work done. Nobody's mentioned if it was the team's employee, if it was TJ's guy, if those two are intertwined, who knows? Got a punctured lung, went and worked out, was like, nah, we're fine. Came back. And then they realized, okay, this is serious. Had to go get lung surgery. He showed up at the facility yesterday for the first time. He was there again today, but he's not going to practice. I don't think TJ is going to play again until maybe week 18 if the Steelers desperately need a win over the Ravens. But besides that, like they're not going to rush him back. So Jared Goff will be okay, but it's been, I don't know. It's a week full of conspiracy theories. I won't jump onto any, but it's I think at some point we are going to get the full details of exactly what went down at UPMC Rooney Sports Complex, because it is not your everyday injury, and not to your everyday player either.
Yeah, absolutely. So for someone like me, keep me away from the needle therapy. Every year at the physical, I'm looking away. Keep me away from looking at those needles. And now I'm be like, you know what happened to TJ Watt? I'm not trying to have you poke me in any kind of scenario with any needles. My goodness. But listen, in all honesty, hope for continued health. Yeah, here in Detroit, we have Aiden Hutchinson, and if he can produce at the level of TJ Watt, then it'll be great. Now he's a player that is coming into his own. Clearly here in Detroit, the question mark has been who's going to play opposite of him, who's going to shine, who's going to have the chance. Al-Quadin Muhammad in spurts has had opportunities and has produced at a level is going to be nearing 10 sacks and is somebody that is also going to be able to pressure Aaron Rodgers. How has the Steelers offensive line looked? Because the Lions, in terms of their defensive line, it's been up and down. It's been inconsistent. What teams have done, and it's no secret, that the Rams quarterback, Jameis Winston, others, they get the ball out quickly. If Aaron Rodgers, I presume, is going to want to maneuver the football, get the ball out quickly, not stand there and take hits. But teams have been able to really limit the effectiveness of the Lions defensive line by getting the ball out quickly and establishing the run at times. How has the Steelers offensive line looked, and how has Aaron Rodgers' satisfaction been with the line that's there with the Steelers?
Aaron likes the line, but I laugh because this is the week for the Lions to take advantage of. They are not only down to their fourth string left tackle, who, don't get me wrong, Dylan Cook, who will be the starter, he looked good last week. He didn't look bad at all. But the guy that he was up against got released about 24 hours after the game. So I think the jury's still up to decide if he is a good left tackle or not. He started one game in the NFL. It was last week. He played 13 snaps in the NFL before that. That was the week before that when Andrus Peat went down. So you're facing a brand new left tackle there. And on our next to him is Isaac Seumalo, who is also likely not going to play with a tricep injury. And Spencer Anderson will start in his place unless Andrus Peat starts. Either way, neither of them have looked very good. I don't want to say bad. I don't think they've looked bad. I just don't think they've looked good. It's been inconsistent by both of them when they have needed to start, and that draws a lot of concern. Zach Frazier, who's their star center, is also dealing with a tricep injury. He missed practice yesterday. He came back today, and he says that he's going to be good to go. At least he's hopeful, but you'd never know with that kind of stuff. Besides that, they've looked they've looked good at times. They've looked bad at other times. The Steelers' offensive line is still meshing, and they still have weak spots. But right now, it's about the injuries, because if you lose your best pass protector in Isaac Seumalo, and your backup is not very good, and then your fourth string left tackle next to him also starts to not look very good, you're in a lot of trouble. So, Aaron's been fine. He hasn't been sacked a ton this year. He's definitely taken some sacks. Some of them are his own fault. But overall, I'd say Rocky, this is the week everybody in Steelers Nation is talking about it, where there have been a lot of games against good defensive lines. This is the week that makes them the most nervous, because they're, you go against Aiden Hutchinson and some of these guys, and a Jack Campbell who could come up the middle, and there's nobody there to protect them. Like, they could be in trouble. So on the Steelers side of things, I could tell there is a lot of concern about the Lions because of how beat up the offensive line is.
How concerned should Jared Goff be about the Steelers and the pressure they bring, and who's going to replace TJ Watt, who's going to get the production? Because look, quite frankly, everybody knows the formula for Jared Goff. If you let him get time, he's cerebral. He'll be able to read most defenses, and he's somebody that has, quite frankly, the best chemistry you're going to see with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's the go-to guy. It's no secret. Third down, key moments, slot receiver, inside, outside, XY. Amon-Ra can do it all. Now you got Jameson Williams to complement. Now the Lions blocking is going to be a little bit challenged because they lost Sam Laporta. They're trying as many options as they can at tight end. They're still trying to work through that, but they're obviously, using Dan Skipper at times for additional blocking. But how concerned should Jared Goff be? Because if you can get him off his spot, as some teams with quality defensive lines have done, it can make things difficult for the veteran signal caller here in Detroit.
Yeah, I think you still have to be very nervous about Alex Highsmith. I think he's one of the most overlooked defensive players in the NFL. That dude can be a game wrecker. He's been a game wrecker in the past. He just deals with a lot of injuries, but he's healthy right now, which is a good sign for the Steelers, bad sign for Jared Goff. He's a dangerous player. He's not TJ level, obviously. He's not Aiden Hutchinson level, obviously, but he's a very, very good player. Jack Sawyer on the other side is a 4th-round rookie. So that is, we'll see. We'll see. It is not ideal to go up against the Lions offensive line, who I believe are healthy, correct? Most of them, at least. Yeah. And that's one of the best groups, if not the best group in the NFL at times. And you're putting a guy out there who's never started a game. You're going to see what happens. He has looked good. Don't get me wrong. He's been impressive this season, but he hasn't been, superstar potential impressive. He's like, okay, yeah, this is a guy that you draft in the 4th round who you could see a future with. And then behind him, it'll be Jeremiah Moon, who they just signed off the Carolina Panthers practice squad yesterday because he played with them last season before an injury. They're beat up. It's crazy, but they are beat up. This is a weird time for the Steelers, where everybody is expected to be back for the playoffs, but at the same time, nobody's fully healthy right now. So without TJ, you're going to lose Nick Herbig most likely, who hasn't practiced all week. He did a little bit today. I don't think enough to warrant anything besides an out injury designation. And then from there, it'll be a bunch of backups. And then you'll get Derek Harmon and Cam Hayward, who are obviously dangerous players, but they're on the inside. I think that you're not as effective rushing the quarterback there. I'll tell you one guy, though, that I would be looking out for. Peyton Wilson is a dude who is very overlooked in this league. And he's not the craziest pass rusher. He's very fast, but he's not the biggest guy. He's starting to add that to his game. And I think the Steelers are going to try to use that speed without TJ Watt or Nick Herbig out there to utilize him and get him into the backfield as well. So I would look for Peyton Wilson, some Patrick Queen. Those would be my threats. Besides that, you guys, the Lions have a nice week in terms of outside linebackers when you're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, with the offensive line, potentially the left guard, Christian Mahogany, could make his return, which would stabilize that. The Lions have been using a rotation. The key potential injury is Graham Glasgow, listed on the injury report with a knee injury, hasn't practiced this week. So the Lions have been shuffling Tristan Colon, Nice, Kingsley Egwakun. But I do think that potentially they could potentially stick with Tristan Colon, who's somebody that's been a reserve and kind of been utilized all over that offensive line. So it'll be interesting to see how the Lions adapt if the veteran center is not there. So, yeah, I do think that it's interesting. Both teams dealing with some major injuries. I do think that Kirby Joseph hasn't practiced again this week, and obviously the key injury to Brian Branch. So both teams, I think will find avenues to pick apart the opponent. What's been the staples of the Terrell Austin? Obviously, somebody we know here from the past, had time in Detroit. How has he adjusted? What has been the staples of what you've seen over his time? I think this is his third year running the defense for the Steelers.
Yeah. So let me ask this before I dive into it. What is the perception of Terrell Austin in Detroit? Like, was he a good coach? Was he not so good of a coach? He left you guys to go be a defensive coordinator in Cincy, I believe, correct?
Yeah. There was a general sense that he was going to be a coach on the rise. I think that he was somebody that in the regime was somebody that was still gaining experience, but not there yet. And with Detroit, it was always, finding the avenue of putting the team in the best position to succeed. And it always ended up being where some good coaches departed prior to them fully, reaching their maturity. So I do think that Terrell Austin was well respected. And I think that once he left, there was going to be an understanding that he was going to be coveted by the rest of the league.
Okay. That's in Pittsburgh. He is the biggest scapegoat there possibly is, because Mike Tomlin realistically is the guy that runs that defense. And he always has been the guy that runs that defense. Obviously, Terrell Austin has a say, and he's a defensive coordinator. He's going to be very heavily involved in what's happening, but it's Mike Tomlin's defense at the end of the day. And the fans, since TA has been named a defensive coordinator, have been very much so pushing against the situation. So I've always been curious, because I respect the heck out of TA. I think that he is a phenomenal coach who gets a lot of hate for his time in Pittsburgh, but I think he is one of the smartest people I've ever talked to in the NFL. In terms of what the Lions are going to face here, it changes on a week-to-week basis, because, a team like the Lions, where you have the speed, maybe you play a little bit more zone than you would man. But truthfully, the Steelers are a man-to-man football team most of the time. They are I'm going to line up in your face, I'm going to hit you at the line of scrimmage, and I'm going to hope that I slow you down enough. And they don't have crazy speed, so it comes back to bite them against teams like Detroit sometimes. That's why I say it could go into a zone if Jameson Williams having a game, if St. Brown's having a game, if those guys are going off, you got to adjust. But the Steelers are I'm going to put Joey out there. If Joey's not working, I'm going to put Jalen Ramsey on wide receiver 1 and see if that works. And they're going to beat you one-on-one, and they're going to continue to. Again, a lot of times, and especially recently, it's worked, and Joey's becoming a really good corner in that role. But this is probably the second most talented cornerback or wide receiver room the Steelers have played this year, besides the Cincinnati Bengals, and that one didn't go very well the first time. So I could see them switching it up. It's going to be a man-to-man game, though, to start, and expect a lot of physicality. I'm guessing a couple of calls by Joey Porter Jr. when Jameson gets by him, or St. Brown gets by him on one, and he's got to get grabby. But I would expect the same thing I've expected for years. TA is he's not the most beloved person in Pittsburgh, hasn't had the most success, but I think he's one of the smartest dudes ever, and those players love him. They respect him so much. So I think you got to go off of that most times.
Yeah, very similar again to John Morton. He's a first-time offensive coordinator here in Detroit, had 1 year experience running an offense with the Jets. But here, obviously, halfway through the season, Dan Campbell strips him of the play calling. And what it was just kind of his inexperience, just utilizing all that talent. And the offense wasn't as explosive. Now, with Dan Campbell running it, it really, Noah, you're seeing it across the league. A lot of these head coaches that are offensive minds, they're calling their own plays. And I do think there's an advantage to that, because they know their players, they know what's going on. But John Morton is a respected mind, comes well recommended from Sean Payton, from John Gruden. He definitely in the same boat. When you speak to him, he definitely has a deep knowledge of offensive schemes, deep knowledge of the tendencies of the opponent. It's just the one weakness that kind of showed up was which plays to dial up at which time against which person. And that's an art. And I think that's something that is tough for someone just that hasn't done it consistently. So I think that Dan Campbell may end up keeping John Morton, but just still calling plays, because it's worked for guys like Sean Payton, Sean McVay. It's just the trend now where almost 80% of the top offenses are led by head coaches who are calling their own plays. But it lends to the same kind of lack of respect for what they actually can do. And in Steeler Town, it's the same thing. You guys want a dominant defense, and any point scored is looked at as a problem. And when you're giving up explosive plays, one person gets blamed, and that's going to be TA. So It's very much a mirror image of both squads. And also, too, then it really does lend to, it's one of those deals where in sports, there is this thing that, coaches can't be there for decades, but the Steelers have run their franchise in a way that is really commendable. You just go from coach to coach to coach, and it's just 3 coaches in decades. And Mike Tomlin has been there for so long. Do you think that he's being unfairly judged because of the fact that the Steelers are not on a trajectory of a Super Bowl? But my goodness, talk about a model of consistency. Half the teams I feel like if something happened to Mike Tomlin, I feel like 20 teams would pick up the phone and drop their coach right now for Mike Tomlin for what he's able to bring. But I sense that the Steelers fans are like, listen, we like getting to the playoffs, but we don't like the fact, Noah, it's been a decade, right? Since a playoff win.
9 years.
Guys, what's happened? Why has it gone this way? And what's the barometer of how hot the seat is for Mike Tomlin?
I think this is the first time that Mike Tomlin's seat is a little bit warm ever in his 19-year career. I'll tell you this, and I think you have to be like very straightforward about the entire situation. There were times where Mike Tomlin had teams that went 9-8 and won 10 games and made the playoffs that should have won 7 games, 6 games max. Like people forget, and this is the biggest example, but there are many others where he led a Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph team to an 8-8 season. Like that's impressive. That team lost Big Ben in week 3 of the season, and they went out there and continued to put on performances, and they're 1 win away from going to the playoffs there in the final week of the season against Buffalo. I mean, that's commendable. You have to look at that and say there were a big stretch of teams within the last 10 years where the Steelers were not a playoff winning team. They did not have the roster. And you could blame that on Mike T. You could blame that on the general manager. But I think that has to be acknowledged. There's also been times, though, where, the Steelers they were the best team in football, and they should have been winning. The COVID year when they started 12-0, that's a team that should have won some playoff games, and they instead came out and went down 21-0 to start against the Cleveland Browns. So you look at it both sides. I think at the end of the day, the fire Tomlin chance, the noise that is in Pittsburgh right now, it's warranted, but you have to be patient with it because it's been long enough and it's been consistently long enough, and the excuses have been made. And, I said this the other week when the fire Tomlin chance happened, it was the first time in 6-7 years that I've seen Mike Tomlin kind of feel and talk in a humbled manner on a Tuesday during his press conference. It was the first time where I said, "Oh, Mike T knows that he has to do better." It's the first time I ever saw that. They won 2 in a row since then. So it's, I think that you have to be patient and say, okay, this is the first time Mike Tomlin's really been knocked off his high horse. Can he respond? Because that's what makes him so good, is how passionate of a coach he is. If he could do that, then, he's not going to ever go anywhere. If he can't do that, then you go back to the fire Tomlin chance and all the noise and say, there was a reason this was here, and it's got to continue. It's not just going to stop. I'll say this, though. The Steelers would never fire him. It would 100% have to be him leaving the organization, which I think is always on the table when you go through stretches like this. But again, it's all about patience, because if the Steelers come out here and they win the AFC North and win a playoff game this year, conversation's over. We've nothing left to talk about. So we'll see what happens. But it's been very chaotic the last couple of weeks, and I think that the fans have a right to be upset for sure.
Yeah, it's the winning business, and a decade without a playoff win, I think that would go a long way for his future, is to get into the postseason and actually win a game. That would kind of get a lot of people off of his back and to kind of move things forward, to give people more hope that it's not just the mission with the Pittsburgh Steelers, not just to get to the postseason. That's not the mission for any team. And that's kind of where the Lions are at too, where, we've only been tasting the playoffs a couple of years and we're like, where's the Super Bowl at? And that's just the way it is in the National Football League. And you start to microanalyze all these moves. You start to look at why teams are potentially, the Lions are 8-6 after a 15-win year, and they're fighting and scratching and clawing for a playoff spot. So I see this game being potentially back and forth, maybe closer than people think. I do think that the Steelers probably have a chance to cover this spread. I think it's around 6 or 7 points at this point in time. But
Wow.
in my opinion, I do think that the Lions, I see Jahmyr Gibbs and the offensive weapons really holding off and being able to put up points, especially if this game was in Pittsburgh, I think it would be viewed a lot differently. But here in Detroit, I think it's a 23-20 type game. How do you view this contest, and who comes away from this battle, a 425 battle on a Sunday? I know you and I are like, man, 425, really? We could get this thing out to be done. But nope, 425. I know you and I are thinking, man, that's just not the game for that.
No, it's the worst. The 425 is the worst time. And people say, well, no, if it's a night game, you don't get home until the next day. I don't 425. What am I doing? I'm sitting around all day waiting to watch some football.
Right.
I thought that was a classic Detroit thing. I'm not going to lie to you. I blamed you guys 100%. I said the Lions and their 425 games. What are we doing? So I'm glad that it's just the NFL. I think you're spot on. The Lions have weapons. I think they have too many weapons. I don't think the Steelers' run defense has convinced me that they're good yet. It's been one good game in the snow Monday night. They haven't lost a Monday night game in like 25 years at home. And I think the Lions have so much going on. And even if they have the same record, the Lions are a better team. The Steelers are beat up. They're injured. I don't think it's going to work well for them. I look at this one as I think it's going to be a little bit more of a spread here. Honestly, I don't think the Steelers cover. I'm going 28-17 in this. I think it's a nice reminder for Pittsburgh that they still got some work to do. But yeah, I think Detroit's just a better team.
Noah Strackbein has given us his time. We now know a little bit more information about what's going on in the Steel Curtain town. Where can people read your work? You're dialed in as anybody regarding the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Appreciate you. Yeah, everybody can find my stuff at si.com/NFL/Steelers. And then the podcast Monday through Friday, youtube.com/allsteelerstalk.
All Steelers Talk. That's where you can go to learn about what's going on with the Steelers organization, what happens, and analysis of the game when it takes place. Noah, thank you for your time. I feel definitely more confident that the Lions maybe keep their playoff window open, and you've got a chance now to continue to see. And listen, there's no better time in the NFL than it is in a playoff chase and two teams that are kind of mirror each other. And I do think that's great. Dan Campbell said it. Bully ball Sunday, 425, two teams that are going to be well respecting each other and battling it out. Stay tuned to Lions on SI for all your daily highlights, videos, analysis, and the Lions on SI YouTube channel, which features the Lone Wolves podcast. Noah, thank you. Let's talk soon.
Yes, sir.